The convicted murderer who in 1966 was sentenced to die.
And he was released on parole in 1989 after serving about 20 years. Tragically, McDuff committed 6 additional murders and rapes following his release.
A sexually sadistic serial killer.
Tell us how this monster got out of prison.
Welcome everybody for another podcast. This is the series that we have planned on, Texas Crime Chronicles. We're talking on the first episode, and it's my privilege. As a matter of fact, it's my honor that the person who I'm introducing right now, crime doesn't just happen. It leaves behind ripples and shapes the communities, ignites fear, and demands answers. And from these circumstances are born people who uncover them. And we are talking to one of those people, award-winning journalist. As a matter of fact, took award from the infamous Oprah Winfrey, Robert Richter, and a person who have reported in world wars as well. So it's a very big honor to talk to you as a part of my podcast, sir. Thank you so much for having me.
Well, thank you for having me on. I was in front of the television camera for 3 decades, reporting from everything: the White House, disasters, mass shootings, and war zones. So I've sort of seen a little bit of everything.
That's a very, very interesting part about when I was reading about you. And it's really awesome talking to you, sir, and coming straight to the point and coming directly into the topic. 50 states all over the United States, yet Texas being the special hub of crime. Every time they take the name of Texas with crime, it's always something much dark, much heinous, and something very nasty that we have not ever heard of. Why? What makes it so special?
This is a question that I have discussed with my colleagues that are investigative reporters and authors of some of the most popular true crime books out there: Ted Bundy, Henry Lee Lucas, all kinds of serial killers. And we've always what is it about this state? Because it's just like the Bermuda Triangle of crime. We think there's something to do with it just being so big. But there's certain areas of the state that are more prone to these sensational, you can't make it up, crazy crimes, not just murder, but all kinds of other crimes, whether it's a bank robbery or drug deals. And we really have never found the answer to that. But it is, well, there's an old saying, everything is bigger in Texas. Well, when it comes to crime, it is really big.
That is absolutely true, because when we have decided to do a podcast and we were planning on these things, I was reading through crime history of Texas, and I have encountered some of those cases that I have never thought have happened. Honestly speaking, they were not had enough light shed on them, and they were not really spoken much about in the history that comes out of the United States. So people like us from different countries have never heard of these cases. But they are some of the heinous criminals. They are some of those kind of people that you really don't wish exist in the world that we live in. And one of them is Kenneth MacDuff, one of the most famous case of Texas.
He is one of the worst serial killers in the history of the United States, and most people watching this have never heard of him.
Yes.
Worse than Ted Bundy. That's not me saying that. That's some FBI profilers that I knew for years back who described him as a sexual sadistic serial killer. In other words, he didn't just he enjoy killing, and he really didn't enjoy the killing. What he enjoyed was inflicting torture and suffering and seeing it in his victims. And he'd keep his victims alive for hours, bring them back from the brink of death so he could torture them more. And he had a preferred victim that was a petite brunette woman, young, that he could control. Now, Kenneth McDuff was a very large man, 6'5", 6'6". He spent most of his adult life in prison, lifting weights, pumping iron, and his hands were massive. His one hand was as big as my two hands here together. And that was something people noticed about him. His hands were so big that eventually when he was caught by U.S. Marshals, they had to handcuff his hands together with leg manacles that you usually put around the ankle. And because he was so strong and so big. So you could imagine what some young woman that suddenly he would attack, and he would surprise. He'd do a surprise attack. And he would typically grab them by the throat, lift them off the ground. They'd be kicking in there and control them and get them in his car. And then that would be the end of their life. You'd never see them again.
That is nerve chilling to hear itself, because honestly, that is not something really usually that you see in a crime, because there is struggle, there is it's very equal in force that you often observe, but in this case, it's not that, and that is something that makes this case much special. On that note, welcome to Take Podcast. So let's talk about the case more, sir. I have understood from you that the case covers almost every aspect of crime, every aspect of crime. So let's dive deep into the case. Let's break it down completely and learn what exactly the Texas crime summation feels like.
Well, the way I got onto this case, I wasn't a police beat reporter like many of my friends were. And by the way, I think the best training for a reporter is the police beat, starting on the police beat.
So if you have to explain what police beat is.
Well, if you're a police beat reporter, that means that your assignment every day is the local police department. And you're down looking at the police blotter. Who has been arrested? Who's wanted? You're talking to the detectives, what's going on, who are you looking for? And you're in the throes of it. You're out there in the throes of it. The great thing about nurturing reporting skills is that you're talking to people, you're asking questions, and you're not just talking to the police. You're out at the crime scenes and you're talking to neighbors and witnesses, and you really do get a sense of how to size people up, how to talk to them, how to get people to tell you things maybe they do not want to tell you, and just to get a feel, a sense, the second sense. And that's one of the great things about coming up being what we call a police beat reporter. In U.S. reporting, in the old days when I was reporting, everybody had, quote, a beat. Like one of my beats used to be the United States Congress or the White House. That's what you covered. Or the Pentagon. And so that was your beat. You were responsible for getting the breaking news out of there, exclusive stories. And so you needed to know everything there was about what went on there.
It's basically like your genre of
that
coverage.
You're focusing. Yes, yeah.
That's what you call a police beat. Yes.
Yes.
So you're saying about most of your friends are police beats and you're not.
I was not. I did a lot of government political corruption. I was in the late 80s, through the 80s, I was covering the White House with President Reagan was president, and also covering Capitol Hill, the Congress, and covered the Pentagon. And, before all that, I had been a staff member in Congress on a defense committee, spent a lot of years there. I'd been in New York, and I'd reached the point where I was burned out. I was just tired. And I asked for a reassignment to Texas, to the Texas legislature in Austin, Texas, the state capital. And it was in those days, this is 1990, it was a real laid back atmosphere. You're covering the legislature, and interestingly, we're one of the few states in which the press, the news media, can be on the floor with the lawmakers.
Oh,
And there's a brass rail around that separates you, but I can, as close as we're talking, I could talk to a senator or a House member. We'd have a conversation and talk about things. And it just kind of puts you right in the middle of what's going on and
yes.
and staying on top of it. Well, I got assigned back here, and it was also a real casual atmosphere in those days. This being Texas, everybody wore blue jeans and cowboy boots and Western belts and sport jackets and no ties. It was great. It was,
Walking around saying howdy.
yeah. And my wife said, well, finally, you're going to kind of get to relax. It's not going to have these severe deadlines. You're not working 6 and 7 days a week. Well, I got here and I noticed that in the news coverage in Houston, here in Dallas, where we are, in Fort Worth, around the state, and especially in the newspapers, every day there was some heinous, crazy crime that you just couldn't believe. It was crazy. And at first, when I saw it, I thought, oh, this is the old adage of if it bleeds, it leads. Now, that's out of old style journalism where, okay, if there's blood at a crime scene, that's going to be our lead story, regardless of what the other news is. It was very, that's kind of a very tabloid thing.
Yes.
But then I realized this is everywhere. And as I began reading the stories and watching the stories, I noticed something in every story. Buried in the story, it would say that the offender was out of the Texas prison on early parole. They had been released for, quote, good behavior or something like that. They had not served their full sentence. A parole board appointed by the governor had decided, well, it's safe to release them. They've done enough time.
On the basis of behavior in the prison?
Well, so they said, but it turned,
What would you suspect?
well, this is going on, and there's so much of it. I start leaning across that brass rail on the floor, talking to a young senator, and he was a firebrand. He really just was just out for the people. I want to know what's happening to the people of this state and stuff like that. And he'd become chairman of the Criminal Justice Committee, which had oversight of the criminal laws and the prison system and the parole board. And we started talking about what's going on. And I said, there's something wrong here. And he suspected it too. Why are all these people getting out like this? This thing. Now, the rest of the press corps, they didn't even see it because they'd been here and they had just become numb to it. It was just so common, you kind of ignored it and didn't ask. Well, this senator, he started asking questions and he had a hearing, and the parole board came in and he asked him questions. And there was a case out of Houston that was awful. There were 2 convicts, as you call them, out on early release from prison on parole, who had hijacked a car. They were running out of gas, so they wanted another car because they wanted to go do another robbery. And there was a young mother stopped at a traffic signal, broad daylight. Hey, we want that car. And they jump out, drag her out of the car to take her car, but just for good measure, beat her. She doesn't resist. They beat her, and then in her car, run over her and kill her.
They ran over the car on her.
Ran the car over her.
Broad daylight.
Broad daylight. Wasn't necessary. It was just like, we're going to do this. It was just like a sport or something.
Well, I mean, in some sense, if it's with the pets, often dogs. If you see them,
Oh yeah.
if they make a mistake and out of love, after some point you pet them, they repeat it because they know that you love them.
Well, they did this, and so the parole board was summoned into this hearing to be grilled by Senator Ted Lyon. That was the name of this senator that was what's going on. And they had a lot of excuses. The chairman of the parole board said things like, well, we did the best job we could, but we do not have a crystal ball. We can't look into the future of what they might do. And the other phrase he had was, well, they were model prisoners. Model, what does that mean? Model prisoners. But everybody just accepted it. And so after the hearing, Lyon looked, or he said, what do you think? And I said, I'm from Washington, came from Washington, D.C., and you hear a lot of BS there, but boy, that was a lot of BS up to our ankles here today. And so he kept kind of digging and everything else. I'm asking questions and looking around, and then I got a call to his office, and it wanted me to urgently come to his office. And I walk into his office, and his face is just flush red, and he's angry, and clenched fist, and he's shaking. He's got this paper in his hand, and he has found out that more than 60 former death row inmates have been released from prison. Now, what this is, these are people that had been sentenced to die in the electric chair for very heinous crimes, bad things. But then in 1972, the U.S. Supreme Court struck down the death penalty. And as a result, all over the country, their sentences were commuted to life. They were to serve life in prison. Well, no one ever imagined you would parole them, let them out.
And 60 of them.
Yeah, more than 60 of them are out. And he's extremely angry about one. One had been involved with another drug dealer, and they had abducted 5 sheriff's deputies, lined them up to execute them. And 3 were shot 3 in the back of the head. The other 2 ran. They shot the other one. He was just running. He was critically wounded. And the 5th one jumped into the Trinity River near downtown Dallas and was able to escape. And it was the biggest manhunt since Bonnie and Clyde, of 5 sheriff's deputies, murdered like that. Well, it turned out that this senator.
And did they explain why they are being released? Any?
Well, here's where we're going. This senator, one reason he was so angry, before he came into the Senate, he was working as a police officer, going to night school, to law school. And one of the deputies who had been murdered, he had worked with.
Okay.
So it was personal. And he was like, you got to take this list. You got to do this story. The state, everybody's got to know about it. And I was like, wow. And so my focus was that really awful execution of those officers. But I'm looking through the list, and you're on deadline. I'm thinking, okay, so who else from this area was released? And I came to a name, Kenneth McDuff. And I didn't have any details of the crime, but the murder. But so I put him on the newscast. I put him on there. And my news story airs at 10 o'clock at night. And the next day, oh my God, there is literal explosion in the state among law enforcement. Like, angry? How have you let out these killers? How have you let them out? What is going on here? And I get a call from a woman, and she says, I saw the man who killed my daughter on your TV program last night. I went, what? The guys that killed the officers? She says, no, Kenneth McDuff. And I go, oh. I said, well, where are you? She said, I'm a truck stop waitress in Waco, Texas. And I said, we'll be there. We'll be there. We're coming to see you. And I bet we drove 100 miles an hour up Interstate 35 to talk to her. And what began to unravel, and what does unravel, is that there's now, Senator Lyon has another set of hearings about, why are all these death row inmates? Why have you released these people?
That's the primary question I had.
Oh, and it is a stormy. And the members of the parole board, they're evasive, and finally, under his intense grilling and pressure, one of them breaks down and tells the truth. And he admits that because of prison overcrowding, the system has secretly started releasing hundreds of inmates. So it is a political scandal too. So what had happened for 10 years, the Texas prison system had been in trouble with a federal judiciary and a federal judge in East Texas for overcrowding, and had been under orders to relieve the crowding, and the state resisted, ignored it. Meanwhile, the legislature, everybody was running for re-election on law and order, lock them up. And we had a drug epidemic in the state. And so they were passing longer sentences for serious drug crimes and sending them off, but they had no room. They had no room for them in the prison system. And so all over the state, they had backed up in the county jails because they are tried for their crimes in the respective counties. There are 254 counties in Texas, but they're held there, and then there's taken on a prison bus to Huntsville, Texas, to the prison. There was no place to take them. All the sheriffs that ran the jails were angry, like, we're backing up. We have our own overcrowding problem. Well, the federal judge was on the verge of taking over the prison system, and the political administration did not want that to happen because how embarrassing it would be. It'd be a huge political embarrassment nationally that the prison system got taken over. So his politically appointed parole board starts releasing inmates, and it comes out at this hearing. They're releasing 150 inmates a day, 7 days a week. They're not really even looking at their files. They're just shoving them out the door. And this parole board member admits in this hearing that we're scraping the bottom of the barrel. And on the bottom of that barrel was Kenneth McDuff, the serial killer. And ironically, what I learned later is, while these hearings are going on, and all this is being exposed, that these people are all out there, shouldn't be out there, McDuff is literally hunting and stalking victims within a few blocks of the Capitol where this is going on. And no one suddenly says at this hearing, oh, wait, stop. We've got to go find these people now. No one does that. And so all of these people have been released by some of the most violent of violent inmates. They're out there killing. And the killing goes on. And I begin to find out that McDuff was who the parole board chairman claimed was a model prisoner. It turned out he was not a model.
What exactly by definition model prisoner is? This means like somebody who behaves well in the prison?
Yes. Well, that's what they say. But what else are you going to do? You're locked out. That has nothing to do with what is your mental state and what are you going to do when you walk out the door. When Kenneth McDuff walked out the door of the prison on parole, by the way, under a cloud of corruption, he started murdering the next day. The next day, he started murdering, abducting young women and murdering them. And it went on. We'll never know how many women were murdered. I think we know of maybe 30.
30 is what you know.
Yeah, we know. But everybody says, oh, no, there's more. McDuff would abduct his victims and bury them in very remote areas of Texas in forest. And we later found out from some of his accomplices that McDuff would be driving down the road and look and say, hey, that looks like a good place to bury a body. And he did it all the time. And one of the things that it was stereotypical of a serial killer is what McDuff did. Serial killers typically drive hundreds of miles every evening looking for victims. They're on the hunt. They're predators. And I remember one of the FBI agents in the behavioral science unit, the serial killer unit at the FBI, said, "Look, Robert, you got to understand, they may decide to go to the convenience store for a 6-pack of beer or cigarettes, but if they see a woman in a vulnerable position, ripe for the taking, they'll take her. They're they're always looking. They're always
Ever hungry.
insatiable, insatiable." And that was McDuff. And he was cruising up and down Interstate 35, which runs from the border up through Austin, up to Dallas, and on north, up through Oklahoma. It's a major artery on the interstate system. And that was his killing fields.
So he is basically every night or every evening would drive out just to find somebody who could potentially be his victim.
Yes. And his primary hunting ground would be prostitutes, sex workers. And what you found in many of these communities, there's always a neighborhood, an area. And it turned out in Waco, Texas, there was an area there called the Cut. But it was like you were entering a no man's land. It was a street bazaar of drugs and sex.
Okay, I see where it's going. Yes.
Yeah. And so there were a ready supply of victims there that would get in the car with a stranger. Yeah. So
He would just offer money or maybe
drugs, money. Yeah.
I mean,
yeah.
a barter system was going there. They would be fine. They want that. They get in. No effort from McDuff. He gets the victim.
Yeah. And at that time in Texas, the popular drug was methamphetamine, also called speed.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And so most of these poor young women were addicted to speed, and they end up looking emaciated later. Their teeth are rotten. It's
Is that the crystal meth that they take?
crystal meth. Oh yeah. Snort it,
Yeah.
smoke it, yes. And it just ravages their bodies. So they're all desperate. They've all got these habits. And so that's what his hunting ground. But he's a killer of opportunity. He's also getting convenience store clerk.
Oh.
He's also, one of the cases we really focused on is there was a young woman in Austin, Texas named Colleen Reed. It was Christmas, and she went to wash her little white convertible because she'd been at a Christmas party for her nephews and had given them water guns, and they'd sprayed her car and it was muddy. And she takes it to the car wash. Meanwhile, Kenneth McDuff and an accomplice, they're on the hunt. They're cruising. By the way, they had been cruising for days in that area, again, near the state capitol. They were actually hoping they would find co-eds, young women at the University of Texas, which is located there. Yep, but they're looking for someone vulnerable, someone who doesn't know. And they spot a woman at night washing her car at a car wash.
Just a question. Oh, so he used to hunt with an accomplice?
Yes.
Somebody.
Somebody. I used to say, in many of his crimes, he had an accomplice. And I used to say, he thought murder was a performance art. He wanted someone there to witness it.
To appreciate the fact that he's doing it as an art.
Yeah. And this was very unusual for serial killer. Usually they don't have somebody there.
Yes.
And in his original murders in the 1960s, he had abducted 3 teenagers from a school's baseball field where they were parked listening to music. Random murder, but he was out hunting and he had an accomplice. And the accomplice held him. And he murdered these two young teenagers, and then he sadistically raped and tortured their girlfriend, and then murdered her.
Oh, like he abducted all three of them, and then he, in front of the guys, the guy.
Well, he put the boys in the trunk of their car
Okay.
and shot them multiple times, point blank. Then he took her for a while, and he had a jagged broomstick handle. So for a while, he sadistically raped her with it. He also raped her. And then finally, at the end, and he had a phrase that he would always use in these murders, when he was getting ready to finally kill the woman, he would say, I'm going to use her up, as if it was something disposable, but I'm going to use her up. And when he did,
So that means him raping them?
no, he's going to kill them. He's finished.
That's what he says, using.
Yeah, he has finished raping them and torturing them for hours, and now he's going to kill them. His expression was, "I'm going to use them up."
So the synonym of killing for him is using,
Use them up.
as if it's a toy.
Yes, they're like disposable. I'm going to use them up. And so she's laying on the ground on a road, farm to market road, rural area, isolated. And he straddles her with the broomstick, puts it across her throat, and begins to choke her to death, breaking. And his accomplice, she's kicking, furiously kicking, and her accomplice is holding down her legs.
Accomplice is a lady.
The accomplice is another guy. He's holding down the victim. And
This was one of the cases.
that's the one case that got him sent to death row for the electric chair in the first
And
place.
yet released.
Yes. And what I learned in my investigation, he had murdered other women. Yeah, I even found a woman that in high school. This is in high school.
This is all what before release, before conviction he have done.
Yes.
Like convicted for death penalty.
Before he was convicted of the murders of the three teenagers in his small Texas town, where he was feared. The whole town was afraid of him, and by the way, afraid of his mother.
Why mother?
So his mother, and this is kind of typical of some serial killers, was this dominating, coarse woman, and she thought her son could do no wrong. He was put on a pedestal in the family. He had three sisters and another brother. One of the sisters, which he raped when she was young and would sell her to high schools. Oh no, I'm telling you that it's awful. So, one day, this was a legendary story in this small town. He's from a small town in central Texas named Rosebud. And one day he was misbehaving on the bus, fighting and stuff. And the bus driver threw him off the bus, put him out on the side of the road. And the next day, when the bus is coming through, the mother confronts the bus driver with a pistol. She pulls a pistol out of his purse and threatens him and tell him, you're not to do that to my boy and all of this. And from that moment on, she became known as the pistol packing mama in that town. And everywhere she went, everybody knew she's got a revolver in her purse, and they were afraid of her.
And at that time, were the rules same as right now? The carry of gun is fine and stuff like that?
Not then. Oh no, not then. Mm-mm.
So it's free.
It was a crime, a concealed weapon, but no one would dare report her. They're all afraid.
It's a small town, so nobody.
Oh, they're afraid of her. So I'll give you a story. I interviewed bank clerks at the bank, cashiers. She would come in to make a deposit from their business. And while there, would go over to desk and put the stapler and fountain pens and office supplies in her purse and walk out. And no one would say a word because they were afraid they'd get shot. if they did. So,
So, I before we move forward, I mean, this is very overwhelming to hear itself. So, what is the background of the family? Are they well off? They're poor? What are they making? Are they meeting their ends? What's going on?
oh yeah, the family had a contracting business,
Okay.
and they were pretty well off, but it was the picture of dysfunction. The father was a domineering, brutal person. Mother the same way. The son was always on a pedestal. Kenneth McDuff, they could do no wrong. But the daughters would endure the wrath. I mean, so, for instance, the father would take the son when he was young to the soda fountain, the ice cream store,
Okay.
and buy him ice cream, and everyone else had to watch him eat it. They didn't get it.
Yeah, the kids.
Yeah. The Later, when some of the daughters were teenagers, when they misbehaved, they would be taken into a barn where the cattle were kept and strung up across a beam overhead with their wrists tied.
No, that's right.
Yeah, and horsewhipped.
So it's basically this
Yeah, and horsewhipped.
horsewhip.
Horsewhipped. They would leave them there, and everybody'd go in and have lunch or go in and have dinner and leave.
This is the broken family.
Oh, you can't imagine how broken this family
So
is.
basically, Kenneth MacDuff had the introduction of pain, or I mean, making somebody go through pain or suffer is not wrong. By definition, is what the family have introduced to Kenneth MacDuff.
Yes, one of the characteristic things he did as a serial killer, as a child, as young, that he would kill animals and torture them. And people that lived around there, they couldn't keep their chickens alive if they were in the yard. He would wring them by the neck. Yeah. And he later described to his accomplices wringing a woman's neck like a chicken.
The space.
Yeah.
So basically,
He's a monster.
yes, but a monster that is crafted by family, if I have to say.
Yeah. And so
He's sculpted by family, as a matter of fact.
Yeah.
They have given him an introduction. I mean, what happens is, as kids, everybody have these instincts of killing ants, playing with the small insects. Yet, oftentimes, you see parents stopping them or letting them know that this is not something you are supposed to do. Yet, Kenneth MacDuff have been watching his own sisters being horsewhipped, uh, and left there as if it's not a big deal. They're making them go through every mentally, physically, through absolute turmoil or torture, and they were and they felt it's fine, it's normal.
Yeah. And in later years, they're his biggest offenders.
The sisters.
Yes. Oh, yeah. And I said that he got out of prison under a cloud of corruption. I uncovered allegations that his mother had paid a bribe to the parole board to get him out of prison.
I mean, now that the stories does support this justify, they does justify the idea that this might have happened. So basically, this is Kenneth MacDuff before being released on a parole. This is who he was, and this is the man that's let out into the world again.
Yes. And when he murders these three teenagers and he flees home, the entire family is called to come to his brother's home to help destroy the evidence, to wash all the blood out of the car. And every fiber, everything. The entire family is there with their young children. And his father has got a fire going in a large 55-gallon drum barrel. And he's
burning.
burning the mats from the car. Anything that could have blood and evidence is burning it. And they're literally, he and the others, they're washing the bottom of the car with water hose, inside of the car, everything. They all know it, and they all participate in covering up the murder.
Honestly, I before we move on forward with the car wash girls case, I want to know why do you think the family is this supportive, yet they know the son is a criminal, an absolute stupid and absolute genius human being that they have ever produced, yet they're supporting at this level? For what reason do you think? Any family backgrounds, like, the only son, some reason like that?
Well, mom and dad are as bad as the son. They're,
I mean, yes,
yeah.
they haven't committed crimes, yet they had spread that across the fear of who they are.
Well, we don't know. So for instance, the father, there'd been an incident that the neighbor's pigs had come into his yard.
Okay.
But neighbor had pigs, and he killed them. And then was arrested, but threatened to kill the pig's owner, and so the owner would drop the charges. Oh yeah. So they're just this, yeah. You can't explain it. It's just,
I mean, what's surprising is not them committing crime. It's surprising that them committing crime in a fashion as if it's a daily activity, like as if I drink water or I take bath, is concerning, is surprising, because they are not. It's not a person who is actually who knows that they're committing crime. It's like daily chores for them.
yes.
It sounds like that, and that's what more concerning. And it's I can't explain what am I feeling right now. So this is this man's family, and this man was let into the world again. And that night, he found the vulnerable lady having her car wash. And was she student?
So when he walked out of prison,
Yes.
killed a prostitute.
He killed a prostitute.
Oh yeah, and more after that.
I mean,
And then
I have one question before we move forward again. When it comes to these prostitutes, right? Until you find the body, let's say, or remains, or some sort of complaint rises from that, you have no idea, right? Because no, I mean, oftentimes they're not that a prostitute has guardians or somebody who takes care of her.
right, they're usually estranged from their families,
Yeah.
and they only know each other, and so yeah.
And despite the prostitution being illegal in the United States of America, I often don't think so. Somebody would actually come out and talk that her fellow colleague is missing.
No. Oh no. No.
So that
And-
makes the count.
And the other thing that used to happen is many police departments just ignored any complaints. There was a psychology of, oh, they're asking for it, they deserve it, they're out, they're sex workers,
Okay, so
Yeah.
basically,
Mhm.
a person who's committing crime is being a victim of another crime, so it's fine. The equation is settled, is what they felt.
That used to be a feeling among some law enforcement. Yes.
And so
That really changed with this case.
honestly, at this point of time, whatever we are suspecting are the people who he killed might not be the true count. It might be way more than that, because nobody have reported these bodies or people missing.
Right. And the bodies are maybe years later will be stumbled upon when they're putting in a new housing development or somewhere. He buried his bodies in these isolated places that people don't go.
So this guy walked out of the prison, killed prostitutes, stay straight out, and then thereafter, what happened? I am very interested, right? This is, if you touch my hands, both my hands are cold.
Well, now he's on the hunt. And what suddenly gets the attention of law enforcement, finally, I mean, we're talking a couple of years, women are disappearing left and right. But no, they're all prostitutes and stuff. And so they're kind of, no one's concerned about
And he's not just a killer. He does sexually assault them.
it. Oh, yeah, tortures them too.
Tortures them.
He was, the FBI categorized him as a sexually sadistic serial killer. To him, the sadistic acts of torture were more important and more pleasurable. That's what the suffering. He's about the suffering.
So this man's pattern of killing is basically abducting,
Yes.
assaulting, torturing,
Yeah.
and finally
Yeah.
giving them the ultimate peace from the torture by killing them.
As he would say, use the mob. I'm going to use the mob.
Use them.
Yeah. It typically would choke them to death.
Oh, what again?
Typically would choke them to death.
Choke them.
Choke them to death or beat them.
Beat them.
Yeah.
Not by a bullet shot or a slit. It's always
Hands.
even there. He has to see the pain in their eyes. Oh, this man is in love with pain. I see that. And then it's been 2 years now. He's out, and we are the woman missing there. And
so what happens is that a clerk at a convenience store that sells gasoline and food and like you see, is on Interstate 35, but it's on a part of Interstate 35. It's kind of a little outside of Waco. It's dark, and she is the pregnant mother of 2 children, and needs a job. Got to work. It's. I wouldn't want my daughter or my sister or mother, anybody working there, but she's got. Some people have to do.
now, is it an isolated gas station?
No,
It's normally in the city.
it's just on the outskirts of city.
Outskirts.
Yeah.
Oh, it's on.
Yeah.
It falls on some interstate then.
It's not a place for a young woman to be alone.
Okay.
Dead or not.
Yeah,
And
that's
she's
the last thing.
and she's got the night shift. And she has complained. She's asked them, could you put some kind of bell or alarm on the door, because I have to stock shelves and I have to go in the back to get boxes of food and cans, and I can't hear if anyone comes in. So she vanishes in the dead of night, and her husband, they were estranged, calls. He would always call and check on her. There's no answer to the phone. So at like 2, 3 in the morning, he drives there, goes in, no sign of her, no sign of her car, and her purse is under the counter.
Under the counter.
Onto the counter where she would usually put it. Well, no woman leaves without their purse.
Yeah.
So he calls the police. And they,
any cash taken out?
No.
Any stuff taken out? Nothing. Just the woman.
Just the woman. So this search begins, and missing posters go up all over Waco, and it's on the news. And they're actually police and helicopters searching the area. Yeah, a body, anything.
So it basically have blown out.
Yeah.
Okay.
So in the midst of all of this, 2 U.S. Marshals named Parnell and Mike McNamara. And I got to tell you about the McNamaras. The McNamaras their family has been in law enforcement with marshals since the frontier days.
Okay.
Oh, yeah. Since the frontier days. Now, a little side note here. They're related. I think they're cousins of the great Taylor Sheridan, who's the producer, writer, director of Yellowstone.
Okay.
Of Landman, of Sicario.
The famous.
Yeah.
The infamous movies.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So, but if you see these 2 men, you think you're back at Dodge City in the Wild West, because when they come, they're big men, and they come walking out, and they're wearing the big
cowboy hats,
the big cowboy hats, cowboy boots, Western shirts, Western pants. and big holsters, 45 caliber pistols on their hips and all. And both of them just look mean. You look at them and you know, oh boy, don't get in their way. Well, as they're walking out, an FBI agent young FBI agent's walking toward them. And it turned out the FBI had been called in because this woman had been disappeared. And so he's walking by them and he goes, "Hey guys, does the name Kenneth McDuff mean anything to you?" And they stopped dead in their tracks. And they turned around and went, "Why?" And they said, "Well, we found his car abandoned just a few hundred feet from where the clerk disappeared.
He left his car.
His car had broken down." Yeah.
How strong is this guy, man?
And so Carnell McNamara looks at him and said, "That's your man?" He said, "You don't have to be Sherlock Holmes to see the killer standing at the end of the alley with a knife in his hand. That's your guy. That's who has done this," because they knew his history. The family had been there so long. They knew the history. They knew about the murders in the 60s of the 310. They knew it all. And they were like, "That's your man." So they meet a young prosecutor named Bill Johnston for lunch, and who wasn't from Waco, and they began telling him, "Look, there is a monster on the loose," and they tell him about McDuff. And so they have a meeting with prosecutors and FBI and all, and said, "We got to start looking for this guy." Well, the others are kind of bureaucrats, and they're like, "Well, we don't have any probable cause to get a search warrant to start searching for him." And they're like, "Look, he's out there murdering." Oh, no. So the three of them, Bill Johnston, the two McNamara's, they on their own decided, we're starting our own manhunt.
Oh, those two guys have searched up. Started with manhunt.
The three of them decide, we're starting our own manhunt. And they find probable cause. They are digging. They're looking for anybody who knew him at all. And they found out that someone had sold him drugs in Austin. And so they get a DEA agent, drug enforcement agent, to put out an affidavit to search for him, to put out an arrest warrant for him for the purchase of those drugs. It was a small amount of drugs, but now they had the legal reasoning. And so these three men start the hunt for Kenneth McDuff. Little did they know that McDuff had gone and murdered a woman at a car wash in Austin, which is about 100 miles from Waco. And because of the distance, there's multiple police jurisdictions, and they don't talk to each other about crimes that are committed. Oh, yeah. Yeah.
So basically, he abducted one, and before that, he had actually killed the car wash.
The car wash, she murdered after the convenience store clerk.
Oh,
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, at this point, even he doesn't know what timeline is, I guess, with the way he's killing.
Yeah. And again, right outside where hearings are going on about, by this time, it's come out that he's the subject of manhunt, and their hearings going on. He's free. He's out there. So what happened on me is that a mother who saw my television reports about him called me and said that she had seen the killer of her daughter on my television show. Well, what happened was that her daughter was a sex worker addicted to meth. And she had disappeared, and her mom and they'd looked for her, couldn't find her. But they found another prostitute who told them, well, she was last seen in a vehicle with Kenneth McDuff.
Okay.
All right. So there's nowhere. They went to where Kenneth McDuff lived. Now, and this one will get you. Kenneth McDuff was enrolled in a trade school course at a former Air Force base where that had been converted into a little community college. And he is living in a dorm with regular college students. Here, and no one knows this older guy here has been a convicted serial killer.
So he's basically living with college kids.
Yes. So the mom went there and the father and confronted him. And his immediate words was, "You're not going to put this on me." And they knew immediately. He did it. He did it. And they had words with him and they left. He's a very spooky character. So I went back there with him to the dorm to talk to the people that lived already because he had vanished. And they were scared to death of him. They did not want their pictures taken, didn't want to talk on camera. But I did find out from them that he had actually kind of bragged to them like that he was going to take women from convenience stores. They thought he was some perverted joking and all, but they'd seen enough of him. They were scared to death. They're scared to death of
This
him.
is what surprises me because he's talking as if he's taking somebody on a date. That's how simply he's saying that. I'll go pick the convenience girl and take her on a date. It's not that.
So up into the point that this happens, I'd already had been digging into how did he get out of prison. They said in the hearings he was a model prisoner. Was he a model prisoner? Well, in Texas, the prison file and the parole file, where they have all the records in them, were not releasable under the Public Records Act. They were sealed kind of by law.
Okay, yeah, fair.
Now, because of that, you could have any kind of corruption. It could be covered up because who could ever see the truth? Who could ever find it?
The right to information to public, it's not allowed for you to go through the records of him in the jail, in the prison, and why he's being paroled.
So back in those days, this is before the internet.
Yeah.
I got a telephone directory for Austin, and I got the directory of personnel for the parole board. And every night I would cross-reference and start phoning. Every name, some were similar. And what started happening is, including parole board members, would use profanity and hang up on me.
Oh.
And I went, there is something going on here. And I remember going to the home of a woman that was like a secretary there. And she knew who I was because I'd been doing stories. And she was frightened to death. And she said, "You can't come here. Can't get." She's looking on. She's frightened to death. And apologizes that she can't talk to me, but she's frightened and closes the door. And I knew there's something big here.
There's a political
conspiracy. Yeah. Then I found a parole board member who was honest, who did talk to me and said, "Look, something's going on here. Kenneth McDuff should have never gotten out of prison." Matter of fact, he said, I had voted against him and somehow my vote got changed. He should never have gotten out of prison, and then he confided me. He said, "I'm actually scared of the chairman of the parole board and other members there." And I went, okay. Well, eventually, of that knocking on doors, going to house and all, I developed sources who copied his files and brought them to me, which was by the way, they could have been prosecuted under the law for doing that. So now I started digging through his files. And now I found out he was not a model prisoner. He had all kinds of problems in prison. But moreover, he had attempted 10 years earlier to bribe a member of the parole board and told him, "Look, if you'll let me out, there'll be $10,000 in the glove compartment of your car when you go home tonight.
And this is in which year?
10 years earlier.
Before 1990s.
Yeah, before he's ever got us.
That is in somewhere around in 80s and early 80s.
Yeah. So it's all in his file. He's not a model prisoner. He's already tried to bribe his way out of prison. Now I'm investigating allegations that his mom paid a bribe. And so the picture is becoming very, very clear that
It's evident that there exists political interest in releasing this man.
yeah. And so I eventually get the parole board chairman on camera, the one who has said he's a model prisoner. And he starts to give me the same excuses he gave
And
in the hearing, the Senate hearing. But he doesn't know I have the files. He doesn't know that I've got the truth. And so I start going point by point by point, explaining, no, he's not a model prisoner. He tried to bribe his way out. He's had disciplinary problems, on and on. And suddenly, you can see it on his face. He realizes, oh my God, he's got the files. He knows the truth. And the key moment comes, and you can see it in the video. His mouth goes dry.
he starts to panic.
Yeah, I call it cotton mouth, like you got a wad of cotton in your mouth. And it's so dry, he starts smacking his lips, and he just comes apart on camera. And that interview eventually leads to his prosecution and a federal
For that man's
Yeah.
investigation.
federal sentence and everything. But what had been interesting is up until that point, and I had been criticizing them with my reports are critical of the parole board and this man. No one, not any other media organization was picking up the story. Not the Associated Press, not the major newspapers, not another TV station. And so I worked for the biggest television chain in Texas. And it was an amazing news organization. But I was called to the headquarters in Dallas. And they said, Robert, no one is picking up this story. We're worried. We are worried. Do you have this right? This is a person who was a major political figure. And no one else, typically stories would be picked up, put on the wire service. Not happening. And I said, no, I have it. I'd prove everything I'm saying. And they believed in me and they said, okay.
And, just a bit off topic. Did someone try to threaten you during this process, like for your life?
Yes.
Thing?
Oh, yeah.
Did?
Yeah. Because what had happened is the parole selling scheme was not just McDuff. It was widespread. I later found out that murderers had been turned, I found out a man who had committed racially motivated murders against a black man, an African-American man, had gotten out of prison for 2 automobiles, one given to the parole board chairman and one given to his mistress. That's how cheap life was. It's all about money. So what happened is so many inmates were holding out the possibility of, I'm going to get out of here early. I'm not going to do my time. I've got to pay.
Oh, so it became a fashion of now that bribe is equal to getting out quickly.
Oh, yeah. And it was known in the prison system. And now I'm blowing it wide open and it's stopping. And they're not going to get out. So they're mad at me.
Yeah.
Now, what eventually happens.
Now you became the target of many.
Yeah. But what eventually happens is when I really expose McDuff and that he's really the cause of it, he becomes the most hated man in the prison system.
Oh, MacDuff gets the most hated.
And so when he is caught and returned to prison, he has to be put in special confinement to protect him from being murdered by the other inmates.
So how did you got him? Even now people are on manhunt for this man, but how did you find him?
So my stories are going on, and the United States Marshal Service came to help these three men, the two marshals and the prosecutor. They realized this is big, and they sent an entire task force to Waco, Texas, of the best marshals, the best fugitive hunters in the country, and they started a massive investigation looking for him. And eventually, they ran two news reports on America's Most Wanted, seeking tips.
Yeah.
And they got a tip that he was in Kansas City working on a garbage truck. And they caught him there and brought him back to stand.
Oh, they caught him. Oh,
Yeah. So he came back to stand trial for murder. And they did a very unusual thing. They tried him for two different murders, and he got two different lethal injection death penalties.
for
And
both of the murder trials.
for the convenience store clerk
And
and the young lady abducted and murdered in the car wash.
he got two lethal injection
Yeah.
death
So
penalties.
he's the only man in Texas history to get 3 death penalties. And they did the 2 because it was an insurance policy. Hey, if this gets overturned, he's still going to go. I'll never forget in his second trial, the district attorney was sitting next to me, and his prosecutors are trying the case, and he was hearing the testimony, and he looked over and said, "My God, he's a killing machine." I said, he sure is a killing machine.
And was he at any point of his time guilty for what he did?
Yes.
Guilt in his face?
Yeah, he got 2 death penalty convictions each trial. I covered the trials.
No, like him personally, was he, emphasizing the fact that he is guilty for doing all these, and he feels bad. He knows that he did something wrong.
McDuff?
Yes.
Oh, no.
No?
Oh, no, he never had a bit of remorse, nothing.
Oh, even when he was told that, I mean, I'm pretty sure that he would be asked to, talk when the trial comes to an end, and he still feels he did whatever he did, and it's fine.
Well, he still he denies it all. He even took the stand in his own defense and concocted a ridiculous story that no one would believe.
So he says he didn't commit them.
Oh, right, yeah. But there was so he knew me. He knew who I was. And I would talk to him going in and out of the courthouse each day of the trial, the first trial. And then so finally, the day that he received the death penalty, so he's being escorted out of the courthouse in handcuffs to be taken to prison. And he is approaching me, and I looked at him. I looked him straight in the eye. And by the way, his eyes were cold and dark like a shark. He had these shark eyes. There was no emotion. And it really struck people. You would look, there was just like nothing there. It was just this eyes like a shark. All the U.S. Marshals, when they heard me say that in the report, like, that's right. That's what his eyes are like. But I looked at him. He's just gotten the death penalties to die by lethal injection. And I said, "So, Kenneth, what now?" And he turns and he looks at me with this glare and sneer and says, "Well, I guess I'm going to die. You know, everybody has to die sometime." And sort of the inference there was, and I'm the one that's deciding when they're going to die. Yeah.
So basically, this man is never scared of death.
No.
So for him,
Well, in the very end, he was afraid of dying.
when the time has come.
When the time was coming, he was afraid. Yeah. Yep.
That's Kenneth MacDuff. This is the man that the society would never want to see again.
Oh, no. This was and here's what was interesting about him. If you had been out at a convenience store or a bar or anywhere and you'd seen him, you wouldn't be afraid of him. He was big, but he was ordinary looking.
Okay.
very ordinary.
Pretty normal, like one of us.
Look, and I have this phrase called "evil walks among us." You would not see him coming. Now, what's interesting is that after you know what he did and you see the mug shots and everything, you go, "Oh my God, he's a monster." But I saw him from Polaroid pictures and others in civilian clothes and talked to people who've been around him. And he's, he's big, but he didn't have a,
So basically, a random Friday night, you see him at a bar.
Yeah.
You see him as if
Yeah.
he's a serial killer. You see him as a normal man who's a bit taller,
but
wide.
I interviewed his cellmates from prison.
Cellmates.
Oh, yeah. And their interesting thing was that, he at one point could look just like this big, goofy guy and all. But they said something could be said or an action, and it would be like you flip the light switch and suddenly he was going off and everybody was afraid. Everybody was scared. His anger, his size, it would just this presence, aura would take over.
And this man have never done any killing or anything in the prison, or did he?
Did not.
He did not.
No.
He is somebody who only finds somebody who's weaker than him.
Ran drugs in the prison.
Ran drugs.
Oh yeah, ran drugs.
But
And had an insatiable sexual appetite, and then would have
homosexual sex.
Yes. Oh yeah.
So he used to rape inmates.
I never did get any information that he raped inmates.
But I mean, even if it's consensual, he used to be
Oh, yeah.
engaging in
Yeah.
homosexuality.
Yep. Yeah.
Well, while he's a straight man outside the world,
Yes.
in the world normally,
Oh yeah.
he is an absolute monster. He has hunger for everything.
He certainly had hunger for torture and killing.
That's pretty evident in his stories. And what is this man? If you have to do a bird's eye of this man as an outline through personality and psychology, what is he? He is scared of people who are. I mean,
Well, the mother of the convenience store clerk,
yes,
she said during the trial, she looked at me and she said, he's the son of Satan.
Satan. Okay,
He's the son of the devil.
I guess not every stories they say Lucifer has wings. I don't think so. Every version of him has. Some of them just walk as us and commits these kind of crimes around us. Walking, looks like us, talks like us, but doesn't think like us.
So before his date of his execution, shortly before it, he tried to get heroin smuggled in to give himself an overdose and kill himself.
Oh, before even getting killed through the injection, he wanted to kill himself.
Yeah, and my theory was that he wanted to be in control.
As usual.
Yeah. And I talked to a prison chaplain that the day before the execution went to see him, and he said he was curled up in his bunk in a cell in a fetal position.
Oh, slick.
Scared to death. And then suddenly, when it came time to be taken to the Walls unit in Huntsville, where the death chamber is, he man up, walked the walk. But what was very interesting is that in the death chamber, the condemned inmate is given an opportunity to say their last words. And the warden is there and a chaplain is present. All the witnesses are behind glass and can't see.
They were watching him.
Yeah. His family and the victims' families have a right to be there. And he says, "Warden, I'm ready to be released. Release me." And everybody was like, "What was that? What did that mean?" I said, "I know exactly what that means." Till the very end, Kenneth McDuff was going to be in control of the time of death. just like he had been in control with his victims.
So psychologically, according to him, he have given the right of killing him by saying the statement that release me.
Yeah. And so then they start the lethal injection.
So this man psychologically, what do you explain if somebody asks him about what is his psychology is as a human being? Because I mean, uh, all over the stories, generally I have seen serial killers hungry, who wants to torture, won't look at gender as much as Kenneth MacDuff does. He looks at the gender, he looks at a weaker woman, a vulnerable woman, not somebody who can retaliate when this man does, this man attacks. Yet he wants to be called a man at every instance. What do you say his psychology is?
Well, I'll say this. One of my friends who was a reporter went in to interview him. And in my dealings with him too, I never was afraid of him. There was a bully sort of aspect to his personality that if you push back, if you stood up, he's going to back down, but not with a weak person and not with women who are weak.
So if you stand up tall in front of him,
Yeah.
he's not. He has a second thought for that.
But he was a psychopath. He felt no remorse. He did not care anything for victims. Nothing. No feelings at all. Nothing. No sadness. Nothing.
These questions, all this story you must have told so many times and so many people, etc., etc. I want to ask you something which might not be something that anybody have asked you, or maybe somebody does, but I haven't encountered the question. Let's say we are living in a different world where you are given power to deal with this kind of people. What would your reaction be to this man with bare hands?
Well, I'll tell you what my wife said as she lived this and seeing it. She was like, I could flip the switch and go get my nails done. Yeah. And there were a lot of people, especially women, felt that way of how monstrous he was. There were women that were reporters that I knew that were in the trial covering it. And really one of the horrific, dramatic moments was that they introduced into evidence the confession of his accomplice. And I will never forget when I read it, and I'll tell you how it came to me. When he was captured in Kansas City, he was brought back to Waco. And I mean, this was a spectacle. And you couldn't believe he's brought back to the federal courthouse for arraignment. And there had already been death threats that he was going to get killed on the way. The whole community was so angry about what this man had done. And so there are U.S. Marshals with machine guns having to guard him. And
Tie him up and take him as if with Z plus security.
So they arrive from the airport in a motorcade. Well, hundreds of people had gathered on the lawn at the entrance to the federal courthouse. Hundreds. And I was there among them. I'd been to the airport to see him coming in, and then I took a shortcut, got there way in advance of the motorcade. And I remember being stunned by how many people. And so I'm standing there, and all around me are the convenience store clerks, family members, her sisters and her cousins. And everything is silent. And they're bringing him in, and suddenly those sisters went crazy, screaming, and you will die in hell in all of this. And the whole crowd explodes. I mean, it was a thing. I thought we're going to see a hanging. They're going to take him and hang him on the lawn of this. But
with whatever he has done, the intensity of the
Yeah.
crime, he deserves it, as a matter of fact.
Yes.
But I mean,
Mhm. Well, when you say that, now, interestingly, usually during executions in Huntsville, there's usually some of the death penalty protesters there with signs, a small group. They're always there.
asking not to
Yeah,
take death penalties.
with signs. They're opposed to they're always there. They were not there for Kenneth McDuff. They stayed home because some people said he'd become the poster boy for the death penalty in Texas when you saw his crimes. But after the crowd cleared, I did my news reports. A clerk came out of the federal courthouse and said, "Hey, the marshals want to talk to you upstairs." And I had gotten to know the two marshals that had started the manhunt, Parnell and
Yeah.
Mike McNamara. So I walk into this office, and there are all these marshals in there. It's like walking into the frontier town because they all,
Yeah, they're all
oh yeah,
in the gear of marshals.
oh yeah. There's no celebrating. There's no high five. It's a pretty grim look in there. And Parnell McNamara looks at me and says, "I want you to read something." And he opens his desk drawer and he said, "I'm not supposed to do this." And the senior marshal, that's his boss, says, "You're sure as hell not supposed to do it, but I know you're going to do it." And he slides across. He said, "This is the confession by McDuff's accomplice. You need to read it." And I sit there. It takes a while to read it. It's long and it's single spaced and it's detailed. Oh my God. It is it's very unusual and rare because you have a first person account of a witness watching a serial killer at work.
So he explained every part.
From stalking her at the car wash to abducting her to torturing her, raping her for hour after hour, torturing her. And I'm reading this. It's the most diabolical. It's like unthinkable. I'd never seen anything like it in my life. And um, as I'm reading, I'm thinking, this woman must be praying to God
For death.
for death. God, take me now. Because he would take her to the point of death and revive her and beat her, rape, and torture her, sadistic torturing. And I'm just like, I'll tell you, it's just like I'm sitting there like the life is flowing out of me. And so I finished reading it. It's a while, and everybody's watching, and I slide it back to him, and he looks at me. "All right, we did our job. We caught him. Now you find out how this monster got out of prison. That's your job. You're the press." Well, I was already on it. I was already getting there.
Yes.
But you talk about suddenly an incentive, a spark of lighting up like, I've got to get to the bottom of this, of what this man did. Then later on, during his capital murder trial, portions of that were introduced into evidence, and the jury heard it. For God forbid, the victim's family members heard it. But I remember women colleagues that were reporters that were there, and they didn't know that, they just been assigned to cover the trial. They didn't know all the background ideas.
Yes.
And they were horrified. And some had tears coming down their face. They were like, "Oh my God." They had no idea. And then he became fixated on a couple of female reporters I knew, and and had his mother contact one, tried to get her to come visit him in prison. Oh man, and it scared her to death. Scared her to death because this guy as you saw, was a killing machine. But that was Kenneth McDuff and his mother. His mother is there trying to, and of course she's telling him, "You got to come talk to my boy. He's innocent. He's been railroaded." Man, yeah.
Mother's love is actually blind, I guess, then. They always say that's the greatest love. I never understood this greatest
Yeah.
love.
So that is the story of Kenneth McDuff,
A sadistic.
sexual serial killer, worse than Bundy. And most people listening to this and watching have never heard of it.
That's the actual part. To all the viewers who's watching this, I have heard about Ted Bundy. He's one of the case studies in forensic science. One of my podcasts was on forensic science, and the guest have explained about Ted Bundy. But this man's case was different. It is both my hands are chilled now. I am actually worried. I am. I mean, I really wish this man never comes back into this world again in any form and means.
So, and I was intimately familiar with the Ted Bundy case because two of my friends, investigative reporters, they were the ones, one of them, he's named Stephen Michaud. Stephen got into jail after Bundy was arrested and interviewed him for over 100 hours.
Oh my God.
And wrote the first book. It's the definitive book. These are both premier investigative reporters. And they were here in Texas. And they were like, well, are you going to go interview McDuff in prison? And I said, I don't want to be in the same room with that evil. I've been in everything else. And what I do know is he's not going to tell me anything. He is not going to tell me anything. He is going to dance and walk around. One of my friends had been in there, got nothing. The guy just, nothing. And one interesting thing did happen. There was an ATF agent that I knew that got in to talk to him and said, pressing about Kenneth, where are all the other bodies? Where are all the other bodies? And McDuff told him, he said, I have it all up here. They're all in rooms. And all those rooms are locked. And then the ATF agent playing on his ego said, now, Kenneth, you're a smart guy. Now, you know how to unlock those doors. And he looks at him and said, yeah, I do, but I'm not going to open them. Not for you. And he took it all to the grave. He all took it to the grave.
I guess this man would, if he was alive, someday we would have not been, we both would have not been needed to explain the story. He would have done a documentary on himself.
So he is buried in an anonymous grave in the prison cemetery near where the prison located.
Nobody knows.
And all that is on it is his death row number.
Oh.
Yeah, on the marker, it's just his death row number.
That's right.
No name.
No point. History should remember this man as a sadistic evil. Nothing more than that.
Unfortunately, they're more like him. They're out there.
That's what I was about to say. On a conclusion basis of the story, we spoke about a man who looks like us, but who is way worse than what we can ever be. Yet he's not the only one in the world. There are a lot of them out there. We maybe are interacting with them on occasionally, or maybe we just pass them in a convenience store. We never know. So,
and I'd say to your viewers, get online, go back and look at some of the notorious serial killers, William Wayne Gacy, Ted Bundy, and all, and try to put out of your mind what you know about them and say, look at them and go, yeah, that guy just sort of normal looking. That's the one thing. They're very sort of average, normal looking. They don't really stand out. Bundy was somewhat handsome.
Yeah.
But they don't look like the Grim Reaper. They don't look like a monster, like sci-fi coming.
It's not the horns that come out of their heads that make them evil. It's the one that they have inside their head.
And the question I get all the time from my podcast, the Texas Crime Stories, and I've had a series on there about this, is that, all right, what makes them do it? Is it nature or nurture? Is it the DNA or is it some way they were raised. We don't really know yet, but I think it's some combination.
That's what I think as well with the stories. With by default, the parents' behavior may be genetical for him, yet the composition of pain being normal is not
Yeah.
there. Is not there. It's what he have learned from watching
Yeah.
his parents do whatever they had done. I really wish and hope if there exists God, this man never comes back in any means and form. And hopefully, no other someone's daughter or girlfriend or wife or mother should
Yeah.
never go through whatever his victims have gone through. Thank you so much for explaining this to our viewers. This is something that I have never thought
Yeah.
would be a case, and that's the case of McDuff, somebody who you have never heard of.
Kenneth Allen MacDuff. That's, as the prosecutor said, a killing machine.
Killing machine, a monster from Texas, the Lone Star State. And on that note,
Well, so I've got more for you.
yes,
Oh, yeah. We talked about his victims being meth addicts and all. Well, it's like Breaking Bad.
Say my name. You're goddamn right.